Hello, Gene Schwimmer here. Welcome to today's vlog. Today's subject is hypocrisy, specifically hypocrisy on the part of our friends on the left. I'm going to give you three examples, one kind of major, one not so major, but significant in view of the occupation or the occupation by protesters of the Capitol building on January 6th. And finally, one very minor one. That'll be the first one, the minor one. Well, maybe not so minor if you're the parent of a school-aged child in, well, anywhere, but especially in California. We'll get to that in a second, but the basic theme is that it's different when we do it, meaning that something that is bad when conservatives do it is okay when liberals do it, or at least it is not treated as seriously if it's mentioned at all. So we're starting with, well, here's a headline: busted. Berkeley Teachers Union boss caught on camera taking his child to private school while he keeps public schools closed. That's pretty self-explanatory right there. You have these teacher unions refusing to open the schools, refusing to go back to work. We have this, well, not just a teacher, not just a member of a teachers union, but the head of a teachers union saying that the public schools cannot be open and then taking his own kids to a private school so that they could go to school. That was hypocrisy example number one. On to hypocrisy example number two. This one has to do with the occupation by protesters of the Capitol on January 6th. But there was another occupation only a couple of days ago. By the time you're seeing this, I'm recording this the day after, so you're seeing it 2 days after. This is an occupation of a capital, of a state capital. This is in Georgia. What happened in Georgia was I talked about this in an earlier vlog, that Georgia passed some laws to make their voting more honest, to just reassure us that the elections will be honest going forward. Of course, I am required to say that the November 3rd election was perfect. I have to say that or YouTube will take down my video. But this is going forward. So they passed a law, and one of the facets of that law is to require voter ID to get an absentee ballot. In other words, follow the same rules that an in-person voter would have to follow. Well, in protest of that, protesters occupied the state capitol in Georgia.
Attention, attention. I am Sergeant Allan with the Georgia State Patrol. You are in violation of 1611 34.1.
Go. Step aside, ma'am. Step aside. Now.
You must disperse immediately or you will be arrested. Disperse immediately or you will be arrested.
So you see the hypocrisy there. Now, in fairness, there were much fewer protesters. Ironically, some of them were actual lawmakers, legislators who should know better, occupying the Capitol in protest. But, well, even though it was milder, much milder than the one that happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, there is still a note of hypocrisy there if one condemns the first one and not the other one, because it's wrong in either case to occupy a Capitol in protest. You can demonstrate outside the Capitol, but to go inside, that is a different story, and both are to be condemned. Fortunately, the damage done in Georgia was not as great as that done in Washington, but who knows what could happen in the future if these protests, these occupations by protesters are not called out. But however bad the damage was on January 6th, and it was really minor, property damage. That's all that people were arrested for. It wasn't anything really, really destructive. But if you want destructive, if you want an example of destructive, here is example number 3. And this is something that has been so much brushed under the carpet that I didn't even remember it, even though maybe I didn't even know about it at the time. This was in 1971, March 1st, 1971, many years ago. Some of you, I'm sure, were not even born then, but I was. I was a 19-year-old college student. This happened, this was in the heyday of the 60s protests, which were much more destructive than anything that the right has done. And the right hasn't really done anything except for that one occupation of the state capitol. But if you want, I'm going to show you a video in a second, but let me just give you a headline and let me just quote a little bit from an article just to bring you up to date. And here's the headline: When the Left Attacked the Capitol. In the winter of 1971, you could still find vestiges of an age of innocence in Washington. At the U.S. Capitol, it was still easy to stroll through without having to empty your pockets or show a driver's license. No metal detectors or security cameras. You didn't need to join a tour, which is why 2 young people who melted into the crowd of sightseers were free to scour the building for a safe spot to set their bomb. They were members of the Weather Underground. Since 1969, the radical left group had already bombed several police targets, banks, and courthouses around the country, acts they hoped would instigate an uprising against the government, in other words, insurrection. Now, 2 of these self-described revolutionaries wandered the halls with sticks of dynamite strapped under their clothing. They slipped into an unmarked marble-lined men's bathroom 1 floor below the Senate chamber. They hooked up a fuse attached to a stopwatch and stuffed the device behind a 5-foot-high wall. Shortly before 1 a.m. on March 1st, 1971, the phone call came into the Capitol switchboard. The overnight operator remembered it as a man's voice, low and hard. Quote, "This is real. Evacuate the building immediately," unquote. It exploded at 1:32 a.m. No one was hurt, but damage was extensive. The blast tore the bathroom wall apart, shattering sinks into shrapnel. Shockwaves blew the swinging doors off the entrance to the Senate barber shop. The doors crashed through a window and sailed into a courtyard. Along the corridor, light fixtures, plaster, and tile cracked. In the Senate dining room, panes fell from a stained glass window depicting George Washington greeting 2 Revolutionary War heroes, the Marquis de Lafayette and Baron von Steuben. And now for your viewing pleasure, a news report from that day, from the day that this explosion happened.
At 1 minute before 1 o'clock this morning, the switchboard at the Capitol received a phone call. A man's voice said a bomb would go off in the building in half an hour. At 1:30 in the morning, it did, in a small, unmarked restroom on the ground floor of the Senate side, next to a barber shop and near several small offices, including one committee hearing room. For a report on the first serious damage to the nation's foremost structure since the British burned it in 1814, here is ABC congressional correspondent Bob Clark.
There was alarm for a time that other bombs might still be hidden inside the Capitol. Police used dogs specially trained to sniff out explosives in a painstaking search both inside and outside the building. The single bomb set off by a timing device left the men's room a shambles, plumbing demolished, bricks and plaster ripped from walls. Army and FBI experts sifted the debris, seeking a clue to the nature of the explosive. There was heavy damage to the nearby barber shop. Windows were smashed there, and 100 feet away in the Senate restaurant, where tables were overturned and a priceless stained glass mosaic destroyed. Damage estimated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars might have been far worse, but for the 3-foot-thick walls in the oldest part of the Capitol. As it was, the violent explosion ripped off doors in nearby conference rooms. There was no damage to the Senate chamber itself on the floor above. Daylight revealed more smashed windows and debris. Tourists were barred from the Senate wing all day, but the entire Capitol will be reopened to the public as soon as possible. Everyone entering the Senate wing today had to pass a security check. The Capitol's police chief told how an operator received the bomb threat.
This building will blow up in 30 minutes. Evacuate the building. This is in protest of the Nixon involvement in Laos.
And there you have it, an invasion, a real insurrection, planting dynamite, and this was the Weather Underground. Some of you, well, I'm sure many of you, if not most of you watching this, weren't born then, but they were a revolutionary group who, as I read in that article, they committed a lot of bombings of government buildings, not Antifa demonstrations and splashing paint and breaking windows or even setting fires, setting bombs. In fact, there is a famous incident of, this happened in New York, of an apartment building being blown up on the Lower East Side where the Weather Underground was creating bombs, making bombs, and one of them went off and I believe it killed somebody. I would have to look up the story, but this was a very vicious, dangerous group, much more dangerous than anything that happened on January 6th in the Capitol building. You just saw that news report, saw and heard that news report, and that seems to have gone down the memory hole. What happened on January 6th is depicted as something that is unheard of, that had never happened before, and much more serious than anything that had happened before, except maybe the burning of Washington D.C. in 1814 by our now British friends across the sea. But there was a time, the War of 1812, and then in 1814 they burned down the Capitol. Some of us may just be wishing that it hadn't been rebuilt, but I'm just joking there. Of course, I don't really believe that. But the point I'm making is the hypocrisy that nobody talks about this much worse event that happened in 1971, an actual bombing, and this was an actual insurrection. That was the stated purpose, the whole reason for existence of the Weather Underground, but we don't hear anything about it. Nobody talks about that one anymore, and it's, well, as I said, it's hypocrisy. It's different when we do it, we meaning the left. If the left can bomb the Capitol and it's a news story for one day, I mean, it got so little coverage that I didn't remember. In fact, I could have been just learning about it for the first time when I read the story that I just quoted to you, because I don't remember it. I'm guessing that I must have seen it on the news, but I don't remember it going on and on. If it had gone on for days and days and days, and Senate hearing after Senate hearing after Senate, or whatever hearings there are, all the news reports and talk shows, if all that had been going on in 1971, if it had gotten, that event had gotten that kind of coverage, I know I would remember it. The reason I know is because I remember very well the 1968 riots outside the Chicago Democratic Convention, the presidential nomination convention. I remember that very well because that was shown on TV. That was an ongoing event where the rioting was ongoing, and it went along for quite a period of time, and so it was on the news every night. This is a one-time event, but so was the occupation by protesters of the Capitol. But you see the difference in how it is treating, and I don't think it's just a passage of time or taking something more seriously now than then. I mean, that was an actual bombing. It is pure hypocrisy. It is pure hypocrisy. When the left does it, it's one thing. When the right does something that is not nearly as serious, it's another thing. And then I would just add to that, if Trump does it, then it's a whole other degree of, if Trump is even in the vicinity, then it's much worse. Trump just speaking near where this happened on January 6th is much worse than this actual bombing, going in and planting dynamite in the Capitol. I can't make it any clearer than that, so I'll just end it here and just say how much I appreciate everybody spending time with me. I really appreciate it. If you could take a little bit more time to give me a thumbs up, that would really be great. You can put any comments you might, I'll share it with anybody you think would also like it and this video. You could subscribe, and you could ask other people to subscribe, maybe the people with whom you share the video, so they don't miss another one. You could put any comments you might have, comment section below the video, where you can also put questions, suggestions for future topics. You could visit my music channel. There's a link in the description where I put my original music, created, performed by yours truly. But most of all, come back and see me again. I look forward to seeing all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.